Merely by looking at the price, it looks like an amazing case. But the problem here is, it's a very simplified view. This view doesn't take into account inflation, purchasing power, or the time value of money. Furthermore, I have an issue with the argument because it assumes that the bag that we bought, let's say 10 years ago, would achieve the very same price as a brand new bag from the retail store. In a gold rush, you want to be the person selling the spade. And who is selling the spade at the moment? It's the luxury companies producing those goods, those designer bags. Hi, my name is Liz. I'm a fashion and art historian and the founder of the fashion label Pelagona. And on this channel, I'm telling you the stories behind fashion trends. Today I'd like to discuss if designer bags are a good investment, and I came up with this topic because of a personal interest. I also have a business and finance background, and I love to apply this to the fashion world as well. I keep discovering articles and videos encouraging us to buy designer bags, and they kind of promise that with designer bags we can achieve better returns than with other forms of investment such as equities or gold, for example. So when I heard this, I was intrigued and I thought, why not do my own research and calculate on my own and see if my findings match those articles and videos. Spoiler alert, they don't, and they actually differ greatly. So this is what I'm going to share with you today. And if you prefer to read about this topic, I have also written an article on thepinklookbook.com, which also has all the sources and background data and my calculations. Before we dive into the details, I would like to mention a few things. First of all, we need to define the term investment. I keep hearing investment in designer bags, and investment in a business sense means that we buy something with the goal of achieving a profit later. When we buy a designer bag and we say it's an investment, it comes from a very different place. It's an emotional investment. You have saved up money to buy this bag and to fulfill a wish. And this is exactly what it is. It is a purchase. It's not an investment in the business sense. And for this video, I'm applying the view of the business sense of investment. Secondly, always check who wrote an article or published a video and why. Fashion magazines, retail outlets, resale platforms, they of course encourage us to buy designer products because that's their job. And sometimes it feels that you don't have an alternative investment to these bags. This is what I'm trying to achieve here. I want to give you a broader overview of alternatives to investing in a designer bag. And this leads me to the third point. I would like to give you a broader overview of investment alternatives. And as with any investment, there are always multiple dimensions to consider. I'm just saying here, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm just sharing my personal view with you here. And lastly, I don't aim to push you into anything. I don't want to push you towards buying or not buying designer bags. What I would like to do here is to share my personal analysis. This video is not intended as investment advice or recommendations. If you have any questions about investing money, please seek the advice of a licensed financial professional. Now let's dive into the details. I used two bags for my analysis. The first one is the Chanel Classic Flat Bag in medium size, and the second one is the Hermès Birkin bag 25. I chose those two because they are considered as classics by many experts, and also most of these articles and videos referred to those two bags. Argument number one, bag prices have steadily increased over time. This is probably the argument that I have come across most often in these articles and videos. I have also prepared a graph for you, which is taken from a fashion magazine, and I've extended it with the most recent data. This classic Chanel bag was launched by Gabrielle Chanel in 1955. This was the first iteration. What these articles and videos don't mention is any potential fees or commission structures if you want to resell the bag. So for simplification reasons, I have also not considered those. Also, what I want to mention here is something that I find a bit unrealistic. We have a very long time period here, 1955 until 2023, and we assume that something that we could have bought in 1955 is still on trend in 2023. Yes, it does happen. Certain items are purchased from this period of time. In this case, with the Chanel bag, it is actually applicable, but I would just like to say in general, I find this a bit unrealistic. Merely by looking at the price, it looks like an amazing case. This bag cost almost 200 euros when it was launched in 1955, and now it retails at 9,700 euros or 10,200 US dollars. So this is crazy, it's amazing, that's what they try to make us feel. But the problem here is, it's a very simplified view. This view doesn't take into account inflation, purchasing power, or the time value of money. This sounds complicated, but what it actually means is that 200 euros in 1955 means something different than 200 euros today in 2023. So we can't compare apples and oranges. What we have to do is to put those prices in a historic context, and what historians do is they compare the average salary in a country to these prices to get an idea, and this is exactly what I did for this bag. In 1955, the average monthly salary in Germany was 235 euros, about 470 Deutschmark. So this means to buy the bag, we would have needed one average monthly salary in Germany. In the case of the US, it would have been half a monthly salary to buy the bag. Bear in mind that this doesn't include any taxes or living expenses. So if we also included those, we would need a multiple of those salaries. What this case means is that your whole monthly salary would go into the purchase of the bag. You haven't paid for anything else. You haven't paid for rent, taxes, school fees, food, nothing. All your money goes into buying this bag. What about today? Today we would need 2.6 average monthly salaries in Germany to purchase this bag. Now I would also like to discuss the Hermès Birkin bag, which I have discussed before. Up until recently there was a big gap between Chanel bags and Hermès bags, but Chanel has recently followed a strategy of increasing prices steadily. So now those bags are almost on par. It actually takes 2.5 average monthly salaries to buy the Hermès Birkin bag. And in the US, you would need roughly 2 monthly salaries to purchase either of those bags. Now, how can we interpret this? This means that this investment is not for everyone. To be able to spend 2.5 times your monthly salary, you have to be in the upper income segment. Secondly, we see that according to the salaries, yes, the Chanel classic flat bag has increased in value 2.5 times. But we need to put this into further context. We need to compare this with other measures to understand the whole picture. Let's compare the returns. These articles and videos claim that bags outperform alternative methods of investment, such as investing in the S&P 500 index or in gold, for example. And they also claim that these bags have appreciated, for example, by 5,000%. And this is where I have a big issue with it, because again, it is a very simplistic view. I have said it before, it does not take into account inflation, purchasing power, time value of money. Going forward, I'm using the internal rate of return, the IRR analysis, which takes into account exactly that, the time value of money. And this IRR tells us the annual rate of growth that can be expected from your investment. Now let's look at the IRR calculation for the Chanel bag. As I said before, the bag cost 194 euros in 1955 and it currently retails at around 10,000 euros. The IRR for the period of 1955 until 2023 is 5.92%. I used the MS Excel function for the IRR calculation, and what this assumes is we bought this bag in 1955, kept it somewhere safe in pristine condition. We didn't receive any income such as dividends from it, and we assume that this bag that was bought in 1955 is still on trend today. We find somebody who wants to buy it and pay the same price as the current bags in the retail store. Considering the long time horizon that this is a bit unrealistic, I find 6% actually a bit low, but let's analyze more data. Now let's look at the Hermès Birkin bag. This bag was launched in 1984 and it is a bit tricky to find the exact retail price of the time. The number which circulates online is 2,000 US dollars, so to keep things simple, I also used the 2,000 US dollars, and the internal rate of return for this bag would be 4.25%. So let's take these two IRR results for the Chanel bag and the Hermès bag for the analysis going forward. While I was doing all this research and my calculations, an analogy came to my mind. There is this famous saying, in a gold rush, you want to be the person selling the spade. And who is selling the spade at the moment? It's the luxury companies producing those goods, those designer bags. And I had an idea, why not look at the shares of these companies? And I chose two of them, Hermès because it's publicly listed, and LVMH. This is the company or the conglomerate run by the Arnault family, who also holds a big stake in Hermès. Now let's look at the investment case. I wanted to see what would have happened if we had invested in one of these two companies. We would have bought one share at the beginning of 2012 and sold it at the end of 2022. All of the data I used is publicly available information. I used Yahoo Finance and also the official company filings. And also the data that I used and the assumptions I used for the bags are the same as before. I just used a shorter time horizon for the shares. I used 10 years to look at the case. I looked at shares to keep things simple. There would have been other forms such as bonds, for example, but for simplification reasons I left those out. But I would like to tell you some things about investing in shares. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, and all of these things that you need to consider would be content for multiple other videos, but a few things I would like to tell you here to keep it simple. First of all, if you invest in shares in a company, there is the risk that the company goes bankrupt and then your shares are worth zero. Your investment is gone. Secondly, past performance doesn't equal future performance. Just because a company did well in the past doesn't mean that it will do automatically well in the future. And thirdly, you are at the discretion of management. There are certain people who sit in management and make certain decisions, and you need to live with that. Now let's look at the Hermès shares. If we had bought a share at the beginning of January 2012, the price would have been 235 euros. At the end of December 2022, the selling price for this share would have been 1,445 euros, and the IRR calculation resulted in 19.07%. One thing I would like to mention here, I only considered the dividends that were actually paid, not those who were declared due to the difference in time when dividends are paid and the financial year-end reporting. Similarly, if we had done the same with an LVMH share, we would have paid 112 euros at the beginning of January 2012 for it. And the selling price at the end of December 2022 was 680 euros. The IRR calculation resulted in 19.92%. Now let's compare this with our bags. Remember, the Chanel bag achieved almost 6% and the Hermès bag almost 4.3%. And also remember that we had to hold them for a longer period of time. And then the case becomes very clear. Already in the shorter period of time of 10 years, the shares clearly outperformed the bags, because we are talking here of an IRR of almost 20% for each of the shares. These are just a few examples. I think we really confirmed the saying in a gold rush, you want to be the person selling the spade, but there are also many other companies that perform really well on the stock market, which you can consider for an investment. Now that was a lot of number crunching, but it was also necessary to understand all the arguments moving forward. So let's go back to the first argument, that bag prices have steadily increased over time and they never fluctuated downwards. As I mentioned before, I have a lot of issues with this argument, and one of them is also the quality of data. I looked into all of these articles and videos and I wanted to know more about the sources. Some give some sources, some don't list any sources at all, and the data is very patchy. In general, I find that if you make an important decision, such as an investment decision, you should have good data. So this is something that I would like to mention here. Secondly, I find this whole argument a bit far-fetched, because I doubt that there's no effect whatsoever on bags when there is an economic downturn. Granted, there is the economic theory of luxury goods, that these goods perform better than other goods in times of crisis. But I doubt that there is no overall effect on the bags if the economy goes bad. It would be interesting to analyze how did the bags perform in years of crisis, such as like 1997, 2008, for example. So this is something to keep in mind. Furthermore, I have an issue with the argument because it assumes that the bag that we bought, let's say 10 years ago, would achieve the very same price as a brand new bag from the retail store. Bear in mind, people are now willing to spend almost 10,000 euros for a brand new bag. They want to walk into the store, they want to walk into Chanel, they want to buy the bag, they want to get the whole experience, the service, they want the dust bags, all the guarantees, everything with it, and this is why they want to pay that price. I'm not sure if they would necessarily pay the same price for the same bag, maybe the same model and the same color that you bought 10 years ago. So this is also something that you should bear in mind. And this is where you need to read and listen carefully. On the one hand, these articles and videos mention the really high retail prices, but in the same articles and videos, often they then say you can buy a Chanel bag at a really good price online, a second-hand one, and sometimes even half the price. So what does this mean? Now, this is great if you are the buyer, but what does this mean for you as the seller? Would you then really achieve those almost 10,000 euros? I doubt it. And of course, there are the cases where people queue up, for example, at Chanel because a certain model or color is hard to get, and then they resell it right afterwards and achieve a really high price. This is possible, but I would say this is also the exception to our case here. At the same time, also remember, you can't just walk into Hermès to buy a Birkin bag. There are many articles and videos out there. You have to build up store credit. You have to wait for a long time. So all of these are factors that you need to consider. Argument number 2, bags are less risky than other forms of investment. Well, any type of investment comes with a certain amount of risk, and what I would criticize with these articles and videos is that they do not address this risk at all. They also don't address how they define the risk. For example, there is the risk that you walk outside with your Chanel bag, somebody bumps into you and they spill chocolate milkshake over it. You may scratch your bag, or you may not be able to resell that bag. So what about this risk? And how can you protect yourself from this risk? What these articles and videos also don't discuss is that compared to other forms of investments, such as stocks, for example, bags are relatively difficult to sell, and this is due to 3 reasons. Reason number 1, the bag needs to be in fashion, plain and simple. Most of these articles and videos, they lobby for the Hermès Birkin bag or the Chanel classic flap bag because they say they are classics, they never go out of style. Well, we know that fashion trends are highly unpredictable, sometimes even random, so I have a big issue with that argument. And I actually have an example from the house of Chanel. I talked about this also with Madame Faction in our YouTube video, which you can watch on my channel. It is from the time when Karl Lagerfeld took over the brand, and he said that the brand image was not a great one. They had kind of an old-fashioned reputation, only the wives of diplomats were wearing Chanel, and the brand really struggled. So if you think about this, if you had wanted to resell your Chanel bag then, I think this probably would have been a challenge. And I have another example for you. It's from a different segment, but I would like to use it to show how random these fashion trends can be. In the early 2000s, Louis Vuitton collaborated with artist Takashi Murakami, and they came up with this colorful logo pattern. And the pochette bag was sold at around 300 euros at that time. Recently, there was a hype around these bags again because some celebrities like the Kardashian family were seen carrying these bags. Now I see them retailing online between 1,400 and 1,700 euros. What I find interesting about this is that there are many other special editions by Louis Vuitton which haven't achieved this hype, but because certain celebrities were seen with that bag, there is this hype. So this is highly random. What would have happened if the Kardashians hadn't been seen with that bag? I would just like to show you this just to keep in mind that fashion trends are highly unpredictable. The second reason is there needs to be a willingness to buy. We assumed a buy and hold strategy for stocks, which means I can invest in stocks and then monitor the market and use certain developments to make gains. Many of these articles and videos assume the same for bags, but we can actually not do that. And the key term here is liquidity. I'm not a big fan of financial jargon, but it's an important term that we need to know. Liquidity means how easily can I sell, for example, the stocks or the bags, and the liquidity of the bags is much lower than the stocks. Let me explain this. If I have stocks and I decide I want to sell them today, I can sell them. Even if I make a loss, I can go online and I sell them. It's not a problem. But with bags, it's way more rigid because I can upload the bag, but I don't know if there's somebody who will buy it today or who is looking for exactly that model. So it's way more complicated than selling the stocks. During my research, I came up with another idea for another experiment. I checked online for certain bags and I used a few platforms. The first one was Vestiaire Collective. In August 2023, when I prepared this video, I searched for Chanel Classic Flat Bag Medium and I used the filter black. And I got about 360 results. And the oldest listing was from April 2021 at around 5,600 euros. The second oldest listing was from May 2021, about 1,000 euros cheaper. So these bags have been online for quite a while. So what does this tell us? First of all, the bags obviously don't sell that easily. Maybe the price was too high because we could argue there's always a buyer at a certain price. Maybe there's no demand for the bag at the moment, or maybe there's just too much supply for the bag. And I have to say 360 listings is quite a bit. I also did the same check on firsttips.com, which is another resale platform, and I got about 50 results. Unfortunately, this platform did not disclose the date of the listing. And similarly, I also checked auction houses, because we are talking here about high-end items which are very often sold at these houses, such as Christie's or Sotheby's. So I checked Sotheby's online for the past auctions in New York, London, Geneva and Hong Kong, and I can't really give you a homogeneous picture of the result. Some bags achieved just the asking price, some achieved multiples, and some bags that are considered classics did not achieve such a great result. So I don't really know if there is really one stringent pattern behind this, but something that I noticed is that location is very important. I did also a check at the Dorotheum, which is an auction house in Vienna. They also sell Hermès bags and Chanel bags, and the selection is smaller, and also the prices were lower. So I assume that in Hong Kong or New York, of course, more people are willing to buy those bags. You have a bigger sample, let's put it like this. So this is also something regionally that you should consider where to sell that bag. Reason number 3, immaculate state. This is something that most of these articles and videos did not discuss, but your bag has to be kept in a pristine state. Yes, you can always resell a bag even if you have wear and tear, but the more wear and tear, the more unlikely is it that you sell it or that you can achieve a good price. And I would like to give you an example from a different field. Think about toy collectors. When they seriously collect toys, they buy the toy, they keep it in the box, they never open the box, they never play with the toy, they just keep it for the sake of collecting it. And similarly, if we apply this to the bag, it would mean you purchase the bag today in the store, you keep it at home in a safe or in another safe place, and you can never carry that bag around. There can't be any wear and tear, just to keep this pristine state. You can renovate a house, but scratches on your Birkin bag really decrease the likelihood of you achieving a good price on your investment. This is something that you have to keep in mind. Furthermore, you need to keep everything. You need to keep the boxes, the dust bags, all the warranty cards, the serial numbers, anything that you can get, because if you lose one of those, it again makes it more difficult for you to sell the item. And ultimately, you will not get the joy that you wanted to get from that product, because it means that you should not take this bag out and carry it, because there are risks associated to it, like for example the milkshake that I mentioned before. And this brings me back to the risk argument. What if something happens to your bag? What if you can't resell it? How can you protect yourself? In the stock market, you can buy certain instruments to protect yourself from the risk of losing out money, but as far as I know, there's nothing like this for bags. So this is another thing that you should consider. So when I put all of this together, all of these reasons, I can't support the argument that bags are less risky than other forms of investment. Argument number 3, Hermès bags achieve record prices. I will just quickly touch upon this because we need to look at which Hermès bags achieve these record prices. We are talking here about limited editions, customized items. We are not talking here about a bag that costs 10,000 euros. We are talking multiples, 100,000 euros, 200,000 euros. So this is a very different investment case, and I'm not considering this for my analysis. One last thing I would like to mention here is additional cost and opportunity cost. Most of these articles do not talk about commission structures and fees that you need to pay for reselling your bag. They also don't talk about taxes or the investment that you need to make into storage, for example, and they also don't talk about opportunity costs. So first of all, if you decide to resell a bag, there will be a commission structure involved, whether you do it online or in a physical store, and these structures are very different and the amount varies greatly. It can go up to 60%. So this is something that you should definitely consider in your calculation. Furthermore, if you have an income, there may be a tax implication for you. This is also something that you need to think about. And also look at the opportunity cost. As I said before, you can't just walk into Hermès and say, I want to buy the Birkin bag today. You have to be considered to buy the Birkin bag, which means you have to build up a certain track record with the company. You have to have bought other items before that. So first of all, you need to consider all the money that you have spent for these items. And now you are finally considered for the bag. I assume that you have to pay in advance. So your money sits with Hermès, and then sometimes the bag is not in store yet, it is made specifically for you, so you need to wait some time, and this can take up months. So all this time the money sits with Hermès, it doesn't work for you like with other alternative investments, so keep that in mind. Another thing that you need to think about is with stocks, you can earn additional income because you may get dividends. If you invest in bags, there are no dividends, there are no cash flows from this bag. It just sits in this bag and the bag value may appreciate, but that's it. And that also means that there are no compounding effects. What does that mean? Compounding means I have a certain investment and then I get a return on that investment which I can reinvest. So my base for investing becomes bigger and then it compounds over time. This effect is not there for bags, so you lose out on this opportunity cost as well. This video was quite intense, it was a lot of information. What can we conclude from this? I learned that a lot of these articles and videos just apply a very simplistic views and that I also have to check why certain articles are written. The second conclusion is that shares of certain companies clearly outperformed the bags. It was quite a clear result, even in a shorter period of time. The shares of the companies performed much better than the bags. So if you now ask me, Liz, I really want to invest in a designer bag, what would I tell you? I would probably say if you have wanted this bag for a very long time, if you really love it and you will hopefully cherish it for a very long time, then please go for it. But it's an emotional investment. In the strict business sense, I don't think that these bags are a great alternative to other forms of investment. Now, what about you? What do you think about these so-called investment bags? Do you have such a bag or are you thinking of buying one? Do you have any questions that I could answer for you? Please let me know in the comments below. I have also written a more detailed article on thepinklookbook.com which you can check out. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.